All right. Today we're going to start our factoring section. We're going to start with factoring polynomials and the greatest common factor. So I can factor a polynomial, and that's the learning target that we will use basically for the rest of this chapter. But I'm going to add with a greatest common factor. And that's how this lesson will differ from the rest of them that we do. So greatest common factor, you'll also hear this referred to as the GCF. This is the largest number and variable, so the largest degree when it comes to the variable, that all terms have in common as a factor. Okay, so it's usually a combination of a number and a variable. So you'll do this in two parts. If I give you the numbers 12, 20, and 24, and I wanted to find the greatest common factor of those three numbers, I would ask myself, what is the biggest number that goes into all three of these? Okay, I know all of these, so 12 and 24 are divisible by 6, but that's not the case here. So I know that it's going to be 4, okay? The GCF is 4 in this case. 12 divided by 4 is 3, 20 divided by 4 is 5, 24 divided by 4 is 6. Okay, that's the biggest number. Now when it comes to like x cubed, or we'll just look at them individually, x to the fourth and x squared, okay, the largest degree that goes into all of those is always going to be the smallest one. Okay, I know that x squared goes into there, it can come out of there, and it can come out of there. Had I had an x in here, I know I can't divide x by x squared, so that would not be the case. So 1 through 4, we're just going to find the greatest common factor. Down here, we're going to factor it out. Okay, so greatest common factor. Step 1 would be to pull out the number factor. Okay, so what number? We're looking at our 8, our 24, and our 16. What's the largest number that we can divide out of all three of those numbers? 2 goes into all of those, but is there a bigger number that goes into 8, 24, and 16? Yes, the number factor is going to be 8. 8 divided by 8 is 1, 24 divided by 8 is 3, 16 divided by 8 is 2. Next is to pull out the variable with the lowest degree. And it has to be the same variable. So we have x to the third, x to the second, and x. So since x to the first, this one over here is the smallest, I can pull out x. So my greatest common factor is 8x. There's our final answer. All right, so step number 1. Looking at this, we have 15c squared minus 5c plus 30. I'm looking for a number that goes into 15, 5, and 30 and the biggest possible number. Well, I always look at the smallest one first. Okay, can I pull 5 out of all three of these? Yes. 2, is there a variable in all three of these? No, this 30 does not have a variable, so we can't pull out any variables. So our final, wow, that's confusing. We'll say none available. So our final greatest common factor is just 5. Over here we have 9, 8, and 3. Okay, 9, 8, and 3. So we can do our check, take the smallest number. Can I divide 3 out of all three of these? No. Is there a number that both 9 and 8 that goes into both 9 and 8? No. So actually the greatest common factor is 1. Now we have f to the 6th, f to the 4th, f to the 2nd. We go with the trick that we just pull out the smallest one. So f squared. 1 and f squared, oops, I wrote feet. F squared is just simplified as f squared as our final common factor. Over here, we have 32, 16. Take the smallest number. Can that go into the 32? Yes, so the greatest common factor when it comes to a digit is 6. Now we have 2 sets of variables, so you do these separately. Okay, so we have g to the 5th and g to the 4th. That means I can pull out g to the 4th. Now I move on to the h's, h to the 3rd and h to the 2nd. H to the 2nd is the smallest, so we just combine them all together. Our greatest common factor is 16, g to the 4th, h to the 2nd. So that's what we do when they just ask for the greatest common factor. They're just trying to figure out what goes into all of these terms. Now we're going to factor it out. Okay? This is where it gets a little more difficult. Okay, so first thing, you're going to find the greatest common factor. So 22 and 44, what's the largest number that goes into 22 and 44? Well, it's 22. Okay, now r to the 5th and r to the 4th, I can pull out r to the 4th. Now, since that's the greatest common factor, what we're doing is we're going to divide that number out of everything. So I'm going to divide this term by 22r to the 4th, and then I divide this term by 22r to the 4th. Okay, when we write this, what we're doing is we're extracting 22r to the 4th out of this. What's left over is going to be inside our parentheses. So we divide 22 divided by 22 is 1. Now r to the 4th divided by r to the 5th. R to the 4th divided by r to the 5th. When we divide polynomials, or when we divide variables with degrees, we do r, I have this backwards, I'm sorry. It's r to the 5th divided by r to the 4th. What we do is we subtract the exponents. So what we're doing is r to the 5 minus 4, which leaves us with r. Okay? So we have r left over there. Plus, now we divide it here. What is 44 divided by 22? 2. R to the 4th divided by r to the 4th. Most of you know that these are going to cancel out because r to the 4 minus 4 gives us r to the 0, which goes away. So we just end up with 2 here. So our final answer is just 22 r to the 4th. We pulled that out. It didn't go away. It just got placed over here, r plus 2. When it comes to variables, when you if you do it correctly, you should end up with one term with none of those specific variables, okay? So now this one's a little more complicated. Step number 1, we're going to look at the 2, the 6, and the 10. What is the largest number that goes into 2, 6, and 10? Well, that's 2. So I'm going to pull that out. Now I look at the x's. I have x to the 3rd, x to the 4th, and x to the 5th. So I can pull out x to the 3rd. So that's the smallest one. Y to the 8th, y to the 2nd, y to the 10. What is the smallest variable with the y's? Y to the 2nd. So we pulled that out. Now we're going to divide all of this here. We do 2x to the 3rd, y to the 2nd. The 2's cancel out. These cancel out. I have y to the 8th divided by y to the 2nd becomes y to the 6th. And that's all that's left over in that term. Plus, now we're going to do it here. Divide all of this by 2x to the 3rd, y to the 2nd. 6 divided by 2 is 3. X to the 4th divided by x to the 3rd. We subtract 4 minus 3 and we're left with x. Y squared and y squared cancel out. Plus, divide this, 2x to the 3rd, y to the 2nd. 10 divided by 2 is 5. X to the 5th divided by 3 is x to the 2nd. Y to the 10th divided by y to the 2nd is y to the 8th. When you get through here, you should be left with numbers that cannot be divided out anymore, and then check your variables. All right, and that is it for greatest common factor.